Hey everyone, it is nostalgia time once again, and in our last episode we saw and did an upgrade saga of how Microsoft created one of the last best Windows versions ever made. But now we're going to see how Microsoft started the downfall of the Windows brand. And that began with Windows 8. So, we begin our journey to that downfall with the earliest leaked build of Windows 8 that we have, build 7700, which was compiled on, and I just set the date, to January 22nd of 2010. Now, because this is the start of the development cycle, everything about this is going to be identical to basically an ordinary beta build of Windows 7. So, nothing exciting to see in the installer. We are just going to go ahead and skip right to the out of box experience. Same out of box as before. We will put in our name. We'll call this Win 8 Upgrade because this time we're upgrading through Windows 8 builds. No password. I don't need a key. The date is correct. We don't need the network. I didn't know I could actually just press enter, enter, enter to skip through each of the screens, rather than just clicking, but here we go into this pre-release build of Windows 8, which pretty much is Windows 7. Some more error messages were also added to System Restore. There were some refractors in the on-screen keyboard application, with the power service getting an overhaul. There is also a Windows 8 Family Search filtering option in the Group Policy Editor. And I do not think that is in this edition, but I'm sure we will see that when we get closer and closer to development. However, Internet Explorer 9 is in development. It is buggy, but it still identifies itself as Internet Explorer 8 in many places. In fact, pretty much everywhere. So even the welcome menu still identifies it as IE8, and so does everywhere else. But other than that, no other changes have been made to this version of Windows. We still have the sample pictures, we still got the sample music, we still got everything from Windows 7, including the bubbles. So, let's do a bitmap image. We're going to do sort of the same idea that we did before. Except let's see if we can draw the Windows 8 logo. But yeah, here's the paint thing from the final release of Windows 7. It's probably going to be kind of a crappy recreation, but it's the best we'll do. And then we'll use the fill tool to fill these in. Seems like I didn't close the gap all the way. Not with a giant marker. There we go. And then we can close the gap, and there we go. So yeah, that's the best I could do on a Windows 8 logo. And just for fun, I'll also try to draw the Windows 11 logo. Again, very crappy creation, but the best I could do. So it looks like we didn't fill these two in a lot of places. Here's a place we didn't fill in. I see another place we didn't fill in. Let's see what we can do now. There, that's better. Yeah, there we go. That is much better. And now we can just fill these in. Actually, I'd rather just redraw that whole portion. There, that's more like it. So we'll save this. We'll also create a contact. We'll just call it 8. Oh, just 8? Okay. Fine. The name is 8 and there's nothing. There's nothing there. Okay. We'll create a journal document. We'll create a rich text document, a text document, a blank zip folder, and the briefcase, which carried over. Yeah, Windows 8 was bad. It was bad. But this is just the beginning. Yeah, this is just the beginning. So we'll save that. And we'll skip the printer driver. And let's try and see if we can draw the... We can't do any filling commands because this is the journal. I'll just draw Windows 11 on here because I can. Oh, there we go. But also, of course, I want to set up some gadgets too, because we will not be seeing these in Windows 8. And in fact, I can already see the clock gadget is broken. So it looks like all the gadgets are broken actually, because now they're just going to show as like a smaller variant of themselves. I don't think it was mentioned, but I don't really think that much is going to work. So, with that, we're ready to move on to the next build. We would move on to build 7746, which was compiled on April 28th, 2010, but there's a problem, and I'll explain. This is actually the first available build that supports boot debugging over a network along with drivers for Realtek and Intel network cards. The wallpaper was reverted back to the RTM background in Windows 7, with the send feedback button returning to the desktop, just like in the beta builds of Windows 7. The rendering capabilities were still unchanged, and IE 11 Internet Explorer's crashes have been fixed, and the rendering capabilities were still unchanged, along with kernel exports, and there was a slightly different texture on the Internet Explorer icon. However, if I want to put this in VMware, hardware compatibility has to be 8 or 9, otherwise a phase exception bug check will occur, so that's not going to work. Build 7753 doesn't really have too many additional changes, which was compiled on May 16th, 2010, in which shows the beginnings of the Windows runtime components being implemented. Build 7777, which was compiled on July 8th, 2010. No, we do not want updates. We're going to upgrade the Ultimate Edition. Again, it mentions Windows 8. Now, let's see if we can upgrade this time, considering I have the correct architecture and all of that. So, let's see if we can upgrade. And yes, this time it will let us. Okay, so here we go. We are upgrading from the pre-Milestone 1 to one of the first Milestone 1 builds of Windows 8. Now, this build that we're upgrading to is the first that includes support for the Hyper-V hypervisor on client editions. There is also some code to the runtime, along with the early variant of the push notification service, which would provide toast notifications from the internet in Windows 8. However, unfortunately it cannot be activated. There is a early version of the Windows Store in here, however it will not work. There is introductions in Windows 8 settings synchronization, and the store doesn't show any scroll bars if it can't fit on the screen. But otherwise, that's really all there is to see here. So as we can see, everything that we had from before is still here, which is good. But if I move some of this stuff over, there we go, we can see the new wallpaper that was applied. This is a blue-greenish variant of their "Let's Not Leak Our Hard Work" background. You can see down here, this is a warning in the case of Microsoft staff that if they So there's this warning down there that mentions that in the case of Microsoft employees and contingent staff, that if they distribute this pre-release build to anyone without any authorization, they would have their contract terminated, and they would face civil and criminal liabilities, as the warning states. But we can also see that there's a new Internet Explorer icon design. And if we go into the help, doesn't look like the help menu wants to open. But we can see the web page is not responding. And here's System Restore. It looks to be an updated variant of that. But as we can see, just still a standard copy of Windows 7. It actually still mentions Windows 7 in WinVer as soon as it shows up. And there it is right there. You can see 7 Ultimate 6.1 2009. But what has been added is pretty much the exact same message on the desktop, saying the unauthorized use or disclosure in any manner could result in termination. So that's what that is. So we're going to move on to the next build. This is build 7791, which does include some significant changes. This one was compiled on August 3rd, 2010, so about a month has passed since this build. So we'll change the date to August 3rd and run the setup. And now I got to make sure I have the red pill disk ready. But once again, this is 64 bits, so we'll upgrade to the Ultimate Edition. Is there anything that will stop us from upgrading to this build of Windows 8? We are about to find out. And it looks like no, there aren't any blocks. So here we go then to 7791. And we will be back when that is done. And as we can see, everything has significantly changed UI-wise. So if we were on the pre-installation environment, the background is absent in this build. And we are supposed to be getting an early implementation of the start screen, but we do not see it here because the unauthorized disclosure thing has been moved into that corner. Now, in order to get our first look at the start screen, remember Microsoft has restricted a lot of these with their Red Pill licensing system. Some clever developers have designed a tool called RedLock, which actually enables these restricted features. But before we take a look at that start screen, let's first see this new thing right here. This is a new user feature that they put on the taskbar. When you click it, you'll get this menu here with options to change your profile picture, settings, and then this is where you go to switch users, lock or log off the system. we still have the user profile up here, and over here we can still log off and shut down just like we would in Windows 7. When we go into my computer, open up the red lock on the disk, and you can also see that here we have the centered title text once again, which would make its way into the final release of Windows 8. And here it is. Here is our first implementation of the start screen, which only comes with the most useful apps. So it pretty much has almost everything on the start menu. So as you can see, we can run games. However, it doesn't work correctly in this build. You can see just clicking on it, on anything, well, almost anything. And we can see how buggy it is in this build. So some apps, like for instance the Windows 7 games, would also crash. But Redlock here also enables the new icons, the new ribbon UI. We can see some placeholder icons, and it doesn't look like they all work. But yeah, we can see that these icons do not function. They don't function yet in this build. But then clicking the Start button brings up the Windows 7 Start menu. Pressing the Start key on the keyboard opens up the Start screen. So some apps do still work, but the games do not. So like Internet Checkers, we can't launch that. Can't launch Spider Solitaire or Purple Place. You could also use Control Escape to open the start screen as well. I'm going to actually create a second Windows 7 virtual machine and install 7850 on there. And meanwhile, we're going to install build 7875 instead. Yes, I know the ROM volume's in the drive because we're moving on to the next build. And this one was compiled on November 2nd, 2010. So again, a few months have passed since 7850. So we're going to go ahead and run the setup. Tell it yes, we want to proceed. I'm going to go ahead and put 7850 in this virtual machine and start it up. So at 7850, the background is entirely omitted, along with some things. Setup is what? So while 7850 did install, I'll just call this 7850, and we'll do home network. So I tried to install 7875, and it seems like it did not detect the drive. So we're going to actually skip to the build after that, which is build 7878. And we'll see if we have better luck with this one. It was compiled on November 4th, so just 2 days after. So let's see what result we get here. And I'll finish the setup of 7850. Again, use recommended settings, and that's the time. And let's see if we can install it. So, when we boot back to 7850, here is the very, very early implementation of the start screen, an updated variant from the other build we were just on. As you can see, we have some of the most common programs, plus we have a search interface, where again you can search for programs on the system. So I can type WordPad, and there's our associated tile, and then we can open up the program like so. So here is the webcam program that was introduced. As you can see, we have some camera buttons on here. However, of course, there are no webcams connected. And if we use Alt-Tab, it doesn't look like Alt-Tab works on this new design because it is in development. There is also a PDF program on here as well. So now in this build, the Placeholder icons do perform their respective actions, so that bug has been fixed. But essentially, with the reader program, and I don't have a PDF to show, there are no buttons, but there is only a scroll bar, and you have to move the PDF up and down with the mouse. So that does confirm that Microsoft is starting to work with touchscreen interfaces in this build. However, this says setup will continue after restarting your. After restarting your what? So in this build, we are supposed to be seeing a new out-of-box experience. However, here, all mentions of Windows 7 have been replaced by the words Microsoft Confidential. And we can also see that the Windows 7 branding at the bottom has been removed from the login screen. So now it looks just as plain as possible. But we can also see that across the system, it now mentions Microsoft pre-release Windows operating system. So we can now see that the start screen looks pretty much identical. However, the only difference is the changing of programs, and the tiles now have colors on them. They're now color tiles. And the game's actually now open. So if we right click on a tile on the start screen, we now have context options. We can resize the tile, however it doesn't seem to work. We can move to other view, and we could even uninstall the app if we wanted to. However, it doesn't work. But because we can't uninstall any of these, here is the new out-of-box experience with the Metro UI. And we can see that, we just type in this, you can see the home networks things come down. We can enter username and password. Use recommended settings, here's the time. And that's really all there is to it. So that's what the new out-of-box experience. We didn't upgrade from 78 75, so we didn't have to worry about the boot loop. So our next build is build 7899, which was compiled on December 9th, 2010. Now, the setup program is fully identifying it as Windows 8 in this build. And this says, get important updates for Windows 8. We're going to tell it no. So here's the license agreement. It now mentions pre-release Windows client. And now it asks, what do you want to keep? Do you want to keep user accounts, personal files, or programs? Keep user accounts and personal files, or do a clean install? We're going to keep everything. And then it says, we have all the information we need. Now, I believe I also forgot to mention, too, there's also a modern task manager in this build. This is the most popular sites page. So, we will eventually see the task manager. So, we're going to go ahead now and let this upgrade this build of Windows. So we can see that the installer now has the Aero Glass apparently enabled by default. And again, we'll use recommended settings. And it once again had the Microsoft Confidential. But we can see now that we have 2 users. And this build still says preparing your desktop. So I guess I was wrong on the build number where this was going to apply. The login sound plays 3 times upon login. Well, it doesn't seem to have worked. But as you also see, the default user picture has actually been changed to the one that we see in Windows Live Messenger. So that was actually a change that we'll see. So here's the new Metro UI logon screen. Make your computer easier to use. Yep, that's still from Windows 7. You can see that the login process is closely like the final release. Select your computer's current, but again, it's not the best, but it's okay. Home network. Help protect your computer. You're ready to go. There are problems with this activation key, but this just gives basic, system information, and then it just adds the user to the system. We are going to go ahead now and move on to the official Milestone 2 build of Windows 8, build 7950, which was compiled on February 23rd, 2011. And you can see here on this environment, nothing really too much has changed. It still mentions Windows 8, and it still has the old Windows flag. The Windows flag that is still the current one that we see. And this looks the same as it did before. We're going to tell it no updates. We only get 2 options: keep user accounts and personal files, or don't keep anything at all. And this is essentially the same story when you try to upgrade from XP directly to Windows 8. You only have the option to keep personal files, which are stored in the My Documents and desktop folders. Keeping nothing, essentially you're just starting from scratch. We want to keep all of our personal files. We don't need to keep our programs, but that's okay. So we'll go ahead and click install. And the process will be mostly identical. Oh wow, it's already 30% completed. Dang, it looks like this one actually might go a lot faster. There's our first look at Aero Peak, which you can see if you hover your mouse over the show desktop, you can mostly see it with the nice Aero Glass. The nice Aero Glass there. Unfortunately, Windows 11 and 10 both do not exhibit this behavior. It only exhibits the behavior when you hover over a thumbnail of a program. But then you're only able to see just the program with the desktop behind it. So that's really the only differences between the Aero Peak in Windows 7 and the implementation that we see nowadays in Windows 11. And as you can see, we have a new crossword background. I guess Sudoku crossword, whatever it is, but that's what it looks like. So we can see everything has carried over from the previous build. Now in this build, uses the color scheme from Windows 98 instead of 2000. Well, that's a big change. Now, you ready to see some even bigger changes? Here is the new start screen, which has been substantially updated. So clicking on tiles do of course open their respective apps. So we can open up Control Panel, but actually opening Control Panel opens up a new settings applet here, with of course options to hibernate and shut down. And of course here's where you go to set the time zone, the ease of access options, along with search settings. Here's the network connections, and then these are kind of like your device manager, and then clicking desktop control panel opens up the standard one with all of the options. And from what the out-of-box experience looks like, it doesn't look too much different. But let's see what the lock screen looks like now when we log off. And when we do, this is what it looks like. So then we'll hit Control Delete and we will log back in. So I was trying to look for the modern Windows Task Manager earlier, but now I know where it is. So if we run Task UI, here is the new Task Manager in Windows 8. However, right now it doesn't appear to be showing anything, but that's until we get here. You can see there are the CPU readings and other stuff. However, when we press Windows key and C, here is our first look at the Charms bar, plus a switch menu, which is almost like the Alt tab I was trying to do. Plus, we have additional options to search for files, connect to the projector, and open the start screen. But also in this build, we have an option for pattern logon. So we can log on with a pattern. So we gotta click the same set of squares. An error has prevented the enrollment. Well, that is no surprise because this is a pre-release build. So we're gonna move on now to builds 8008 and 8032. First, let's start with 8032. I have a separate virtual machine set up because I have downloaded the 32-bit edition, and like I said, we cannot go from 64 to 32. So this one was compiled on June 23rd, 2011, and on the other virtual machine, we got build 8008, which was compiled on May 18th of 2011. The date has already been set, so all we just need to do now is go and load the disk. And we can see on 8032 it now says loading files instead of just Windows is loading files. And as you can see, here's the new boot screen with the beta fish and the spinning wheel. It looks pretty close to the final release, except that welcome text that's not normally seen. And we can see that all references, or really the entire installer, has been reverted back to Windows 7. I can see on both the installers look very identical. And we can now see that we have the new Task Manager on by default. And we can see that not responding statuses have actually been changed to say busy. Here is 8032, and as we can see, the out-of-box experience background is screwed up. You can see the left half of it is in like grayscale, and then another one is just black. So we'll call this Win832 because this is going to be a 32-bit machine. As the remainder of these builds we'll be taking a look at are in the 32-bit scheme. Well, some of them. So now it just says finalizing your settings, and there's the Microsoft Confidential text. And once again, the Windows 7 branding has been stripped off the login screen. And we can see that the Windows 7 style has basically been implemented here. And here on the desktop, this is where we get our first implementation of the Microsoft Store, which would be utilized in the final release. But in Windows 8, it's actually not called the Microsoft Store, it's actually called the Windows Store. But again, it would later be rebranded to the Microsoft Store in Windows 10. We can see the autoplay menu has been reverted back to the one in Windows 7. Alright, so here we go into build 8032. And as we can see here, the start screen is really coming together. You can see some icons are missing. But here, it's MS Resource short item name. This is actually the label for the Microsoft Store. And then we can go back to the desktop. And as we can see, We still have that crossword background from earlier. So it says just a few things before you get started. We can see it's looking, this out of box is looking pretty close. Here you just set your background color and you can name your PC. And here's what would be the Express settings. Looks to be in a, is this in the US or English or UK version? But whatever. There's a use recommended, which is Express, and then this is the custom settings menu. And then here is the first implementation of the out-of-box experience that actually asks for a Windows Live ID, which, as I mentioned, would later be known as a Microsoft account. And here it gives you the benefits of both a Live ID and a local account. It just says create a username. And so this is where you would go to create a username and a password. And you can see that spinning circle does look final, so, and everything about this build is coming together. However, some of the buttons are unresponsive again. But I actually just noticed something. If I hover over the start button here, well, actually in the corner, we can see that we have now a smaller charms menu, which again has the options same as before. We have the access to the settings, connect to a projector, share, and search for files and programs. Search in the Microsoft Store, which doesn't even exist. And here is the settings menu on the other charms bar. It is starting to look final. You can see we have the network icons. That's from the final release. This is where you go to set the volume. Again, that looks pretty final. You can bring it up to 101% for some reason. This is where you go to view your notifications. Well, actually, this is where you turn them on and off. And then this is where you get your options to log off and shut down. But there actually is something different in this build. So if I open up the Task Manager, which has received some updates, I'm going to actually generate a system crash. We can see that the crash screen has actually been changed, so it doesn't have the blue screen with all that text. It's been simplified to now say your computer needs to restart. It encountered a problem and will restart automatically, and it gives an error code. And then it says collecting information about the problem with the estimated time remaining. Now, this is not how it would behave in the final release, and this is not how the screen would be. It would actually be reverted back to blue, and there would also be some other additions too. And we will see that as we continue here. And here's the updated lock screen, considering I have a second user. And see, this is not where the Ethernet icon would be in the final release. And I guess we have to press the space bar to move it up. So there's our two users. We'll go ahead and log in with this one. And we can see the accent color that we applied previously has actually applied to this account. So we are inching very close to the developer preview. As we can see down here, the build string has actually been changed so that it now mentions Windows Developer Preview. And if we open up WinVer, it still mentions Microsoft Confidential, but again, it still says Windows Developer Preview. And we can see there's also a new media servers toggle. I don't know what that's there for. But I've just went ahead and put in the disk for the next build 8056, which was compiled on July 27th, 2011. And we can see that instead of it saying Windows 8, it just now says Windows. And here is a new screen. It says get the latest, and we'll just say no, we do not want updates. So then it checks the machine to make sure everything is ready to go. It said, drum roll please, success, the product key worked. So once again, it mentions a pre-release Windows client. And now it says keep user accounts, personal files, and programs that work automatically. So I'm guessing it only saves compatible programs with Windows 8. And I believe this is actually the same story too with other versions going forward, including Windows 10. Because if you remember, after we upgraded the Dell Vostro to Windows 10, I got a whole bunch of notifications mentioning that a whole bunch of Bluetooth and driver programs were not compatible with Windows 10. But we're going to go ahead and click next. And now it says, let's see if you have to do anything first. We're checking to see if you need to do anything to get your PC ready for Windows Developer Preview. I'm really intrigued by the messages. It says, all set to go. While Windows Developer Preview installs, you won't be able to use your PC. It's time. Say farewell to Windows 7 Ultimate. Hell yeah, say farewell to Windows 7 Ultimate. Well, that's kind of a unique twist that they did. And as we can see the installing screen, this actually does behave like the final release. Except it says this might take a while, so you have time to grab a snack or a cup of coffee. Your PC will restart several times before we're done. And interestingly, in the final release, even though it says that I can't use the machine, I actually still can. As you know, I can still press the start button and I can still do stuff. As we can see, the gadgets from Windows 7 also still work. However, it won't be this way much longer, because as we're nearing the end of the cycle here to the developer preview, then eventually those gadgets will be gone. But as we can see, there's a progress bar that would not be the case in the final release. And there's also the completed text there. I believe that would also be altered in the final release, as that progress bar would be replaced by the spinning dots. So we'll just let it go, and then we'll be back when it's done. So here we go again, home network, ask me later. And now we can see the out-of-box experience mentions Windows Developer Preview, and it's even mentioned there at the bottom. But now, this is the first build where preparing your desktop is now known as preparing your PC. And in fact, they would make mentions of computer as PC as we continue through development here. So looking at it here, we'll once again have an updated arrow theme, and we also have an updated background. Looking at the start menu, again, we still have the gadgets, as that was the last program I opened up in the last build. And we can see that Internet Explorer 10 replaces IE9, it's an update. But also, the Windows DVD Maker has been removed from the operating system. So we're logging in here. There's a scroll bar in the center, which is kind of weird. But as you can see, the animation of the start screen on here is final. The start screen is looking very close to being final. Again, the store app doesn't do anything. And here is the new control panel. And this is where you get your activation, details, and this is where you can change the lock screen background, the start screen, and the user tile. And then this is where you change your users, the network notifications. It's looking pretty close to being final at this point. And then, of course, you can still open the classic control panel from there. And then if we go to the side here, it doesn't look like it. But if we press Windows key C, here is the updated charms bar, or at least a close enough implementation of such. And you can see this is what I was talking about, the clock. So we can see we now have an updated clock in this build. But otherwise, nothing has changed in relation to other stuff. So now we're going to take a look at the out-of-box experience in this build. So you can see, let's go through a few basics. That's final. And we can see the computer name is grayed out because we've already set it. And here's the new settings menu. And we can see it only mentions benefits of Express settings. And then here's where again it says, congratulations, you and your things made it through the move. You can now set up your email address to log into your user account, connect to the things you care about. And then it says, click the skip button if you want to continue. So that's what the out-of-box experience looks like here. So if we open up WinVer once again, now it mentions Windows Developer Preview instead of the Microsoft Confidential. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on now to the next build, which is the official Windows 8 Developer Preview build. Make sure I have the correct architecture. Build 8102, which was compiled on August 30th of 2011. So basically it's the Windows 7 logo, but without the 7. So it just says Windows. And we will see some more updates. It says go online to get updates now, which we will not do. But once again, everything else looks pretty much the same, except you can see the steps thing at the top actually now functions. So here is the updated license agreement that now mentions Windows Developer Preview. However, we actually do not have the option to upgrade and keep everything. We just keep personal files or nothing at all. I'm okay with keeping the personal files. Speaking of personal files, we forgot to create some. Let's create some now and see if they carry over. So we'll create a folder, a blank bitmap image, and does the paint program even work on here? It does, it just took forever to load. Probably because it's a 32-bit. So I'm just going to do my own version of the crossword. It's probably going to be terrible, but what the heck. Alright. We'll save it. And then we'll add a contact here and we'll see if it carries over. I'll also add a journal document. Let's do what we had set up on the other one, where everything is 8. I don't care if the email address is valid. And we can open up the journal document. we can see that the Windows Journal still opens. I'll just draw a big Windows logo. I'll just put the number 11 beside it. And we'll also add a rich text document. And we'll name it The Beginning of the Downfall. We'll hit save. And then we'll add a blank text document that will read the same thing. And finally, we'll add a zip folder that is blank. So as we can see here, it's ready to go. It says, while Windows Developer Preview installs, you won't be able to use your PC. To recap, here's what you've chosen to do. So we can see this message here is final. So now we'll go ahead and begin the upgrade. And now it just says, this might take a while. Your PC will restart several times before we're done. So they've shortened that text. So here's what looks to be the final settings screen. Again, that's the Express settings. And here's once again about Live ID. So as we can see that everything is no longer stopped by red lock because now everything is enabled by default out of the box, which is amazing. So we can see once again it now says preparing your PC. And this would actually give the public the first look at the next release of Windows. So as we can see here, here's what looks to be a sort of final implementation of the start screen. So yeah, it behaves pretty much like the final release, except because this is the developer preview, we're getting some developer-based apps. So these are already coming up on the start screen by default. So there's a lot to look at here. Looking at the desktop, we can actually see all the personal files did carry over, including the crossword background that we had done in the last build. And when we do Windows key C, there's that same charms menu. I think that other menu is coming up on the side yet. And there actually wasn't a startup sound. And we can see we have some different sounds here. But again, they're still from Windows 7. So here is the control panel in green here. So again, we can check for updates and whatnot. But let's actually look at a few of these here. There's a piano app. Don't even know if that works, but look at all these games. Tweet at Rama. So guessing since this was a developer preview, these must be some like test apps for Windows 8. However, it doesn't look like either of them work. It's probably because either I'm using the 32-bit edition of the developer preview or I'm using 64. But once again, we can resize apps on the start screen. There's a remote desktop app. So yeah, there are apps that don't appear to work. But we can still open up our journal document from before. Here's the contact that we had. Here's a bitmap image, which again is that crossword. And there's that zip folder, which absolutely is blank. The variant of the developer preview that we're using here is a standard compile in both 32 and 64-bit editions, but also those who attended the conference also got a 64-bit based tablet, which was manufactured by Samsung, with this developer preview build pre-installed. The default games from Vista and 7 are gone, and they would be removed from Windows 8. However, there is actually a third-party add-on that could be downloaded that you could actually restore those games. When we can still do gadgets in this build. However, we would not do this in the final release, and it's for security reasons. But let's continue looking around. So here is what looks to be an updated version of Internet Explorer. It's still Internet Explorer 10. The start screen layout by default now just shows Internet Explorer, Windows Explorer, Control Panel, Store, and the Remote Desktop. And then again with the developer sample applications. I shouldn't really say applications, but rather should simplify it as apps. And as we also saw, there was a updated boot screen that removes the beta fish and now mentions it as Windows Developer Preview. However, we would actually see the fish return in a later build. So now to take a look at the rest of the builds, we're going to go back to the 64-bit virtual machine I have of Windows 8. Now that's because the next build, 8137, that I have is a 64-bit variant, and this one was compiled on October 18th, 2011, so it's been a few months after the developer preview of Windows 8. So now, instead of saying welcome loading files, it now just says loading files. And we'll once again see the developer preview boot screen with the final animation of the spinning dots. So everything here looks pretty close to being final. But we're going to see some major changes in the setup screen. As you can see, it now just says Windows. So here again is the out-of-box experience. Let's do the green color. Name this Win864-2, as this is a second version. Once again, this is sort of final. But now this says, enter your favorite email address so we can go online and set up your Windows Live ID. Signing in this way makes Windows 8 Beta look and feel like your own. Windows Live will sync some settings like your browser favorites and history across the PCs you use. But then here, don't want to sign in with a Windows Live ID? You just click that, and again, it gives you the differences between a Live ID and a local account. So now it makes mentions of a local account which would be utilized in the final release. So now it reads Windows 8 Beta at the bottom, so pretty much all references to developer preview are gone. And once again, we have the same messages as before, which say preparing your PC. Here's the start screen once more. We can see that really it looks the same except we don't have all those programs, which were from the developer preview. But anyway, here it is. Now again, this is all clean, so there isn't really going to be anything too different in this build. However, the build string, as you can see, still mentions developer preview, but WinVer now says Windows 8 Beta. However, again, still mentions Windows Developer Preview. But as you saw with the out of box experience, you could only set 8 colors in this build. However, you could set 25 different colors, while maintaining the accent color to choose from for the final release. We're going to go on now to build 8154, which was compiled on November 15th of 2011. And as you can see, here's the new notification that makes its debut in this build. So you can tap here and we can run the setup. I believe the new sounds also debut in this build. Once again, we have the just says Windows. So yeah, there's still a lot of sounds that have not been changed. There's still Windows 7. But, as you can see here, the steps bar at the top is gone. It's been removed. Your product key checks out. It now says, still mentions developer preview. And now we once again have the option to keep everything. So let's see if you have to do anything first. We'll find out. But meanwhile, let's create some files. Alright, so I'll also create a zip folder, a text document. Save the document and close it. And we will also create a rich text document that will read the exact same thing. And last but not least, a journal document. No, I don't want the printer driver. Let's just do a whole bunch of scribbles. Okay. Alright, we'll go ahead and X that out. I created a couple of random contacts here. Well, this one. I contact a fictitious contact of Una. This is her hairstyle there. And even a bitmap of the Windows 7 logo. A crappy implementation. Now let's see if it all carries over. So once again, we are limited to 8 colors. Here are the express settings once again. But now, this is where it makes mentions of a Microsoft account. And it says skip this to continue using your other accounts. So I suppose that's if you're upgrading, which is what we did. And you can see there's the green tint that we saw earlier. We can see that the mentions of Windows 8 beta have actually been reverted back to Windows Developer Preview on this screen, particularly. Here's the start screen once more. And we can see that now we have two control panel icons. This one opens up the Windows 8 control panel. If you rebuilt your PC recently, you may be able to use your current key. That looks to be new. But then here are also some new updated toggles as well. And I believe, just like in the final release, we can, I guess it looks like that wasn't implemented yet. But then we can go to the desktop control panel, like so. And we can see that everything has carried over. Everything that we've had, but not the placement of them. My crappy image of Una's hairstyle, fictitious contact for her, and everything else like that. So that's really the only change that we're seeing in this build. And there actually now is a new theme change thing. You can see some of the new themes here. But I like this feature. But what's interesting about this feature is that the window color will automatically change. So here's theme 2. And we can switch it to high contrast and we can see the new style. But then also in one of the earlier builds, there was actually a prototype sound for proximity connection. But once again, we can see where it just says Windows. We will find that in its media folder. The proximity connection. And let's see if this is the prototype sound. Here's the media player. Let's see if this is the prototype one. Nope. So might be from that previous build we were coming from. But let's go there and take a look.
Proximity.
Yep, that's essentially the placeholder sound. So here is the updated developer preview thing. We can see that everything is now in the right place, except the only difference is the background. Here again is the developer preview, and now it says, what do you want to keep? Want to keep Windows settings, personal files, and apps? Just keep personal files or nothing. So everything's almost final. Oh, and before we update to this build, we gotta first set the date to when this build was compiled, 8175. And that date would be December 19th, 2011. It says, before you can continue, you have to take care of these things. A few changes need to be made to Windows before we can continue. So it's asking us to restart, and we'll do just that. We are ready to update to this build. It says make sure you save your files and close any apps. You won't be able to use your PC after you click install. So it looks like this text must have been changed, but I do not think that will be the case for the final release. But once again, here is the Charms bar, which has received some updates. Except Connect is now known as Devices in this build, which again, you can use it to project your screen to another device. But otherwise, that's really everything there is to see in this build. But I can also see that the spinning circle was slightly changed, the animation. It almost kind of looks like the spinning circle that we would see in Microsoft Office, in the Office version of Windows 8, particularly Office 2013. That actually would come out a year after the main Windows 8, particularly with the 8.1 update that provides enhancements and improvements to the final build of Windows 8, which we're slowly but surely working our way towards. So pretty much everything else here is just going to be identical. So here's the same out of box experience from before. We only get a selection of 8 colors, and oh, is this a slider? Huh. Neat, that's a slider. We can actually slide and make our choice. Once again, same as before, use express settings. We'll continue with our local account. And as we can see, we have some more changes. We have a new user icon, and now instead of saying preparing your PC, it now says preparing Windows. And this actually would be the same case for the final release of Windows 8 and eventually into 8.1 and 10. So here's the start screen once again. As we can see, nothing new has changed except the desktop animation. The animation, when you open the desktop, that wouldn't be in the final release, but the animation would go into some of the other apps. But we can see that stuff for Windows Update and really this whole settings app looks to be final. looks to be like the final release. But then here, you can't activate Windows until you personalize your PC. Well, until you activate the system. But then we get our first look at the updated lock screen animation. You can slide up, and normally when you swipe up, you'd have to click the sign in button, and that's the case for Windows 10 and other builds going forward. But other than that, it doesn't look like anything else much has changed. Now that's the final notification sound. Well, that actually would be used in the Windows Phone OS. However, it wouldn't be used officially here in the consumer edition of Windows. So anyway, you can see some new icons there. So we're going to go ahead and jump now to the second preview build of Windows 8, the second of 3 public preview builds. We're going to the official consumer preview release of Windows 8, build 8250. And you can see right away the text has been changed to say Windows 8 Consumer Preview. And before we proceed, we need to change the date to when this build was compiled. And this one was compiled on February 17th of 2012. And then on February 29th, this would be made available to the general public. And now the license agreement mentions Windows 8 Consumer Preview. But here, it asks what you want to keep in Windows 8 Consumer Preview. We want to keep, again, we only want to keep our personal files. We don't have any programs on the system. All we need are our personal files. So here's our lovely bitmap image of Windows 7. Of course, you still have my crappy enactment of Una's hairstyle and her fictitious contact, along with the text documents about how much Windows 7 means to me. And then the two blank folders and the journal document of the scribbles and everything. And I think I saw that spinning circle was final. But again, everything says consumer preview, and we're ready to upgrade. And yep, that spinning circle is final. And the text there with the complete, yep, that's what I said earlier. That's what it would be in the final release of Windows 8. So here we go. We are going from 8175 to the official consumer preview build of Windows 8. So here is the updated boot screen logo, I guess you could call it. See, we have the beta fish again, but now you can see an engraving of the number 8, which confirms that this is indeed the consumer preview build of Windows 8. But everything else is mostly identical prompt-wise to the last build. So same as before, you only get 8 colors, use Express settings. Here's again with the congratulations Junior, things make it through the move. And again, talks about the benefits of using a Microsoft account. And now we are finalizing the settings once more. We can see that the message there is final. User icon, I believe, looks final. And once again, the text messages look exactly like the final release. And here it is. Here is the start screen in its almost final design. In fact, it does look like the final design, as we can see some final apps here on the system. So now we have our first, finally, working implementation of the store. And now we can drag apps down to close them. And this is what would eventually become the Xbox app. The Xbox game app, almost like an Xbox hub. Here's the license agreement you gotta accept in order to use. And then of course here, this is where you get to see games from Xbox Live. Again, you need to have a Microsoft account in order to use it. Then we have the Maps app. We'll take a look at each of them before we move on. to the next build, since we are almost at the end here. So here's Bing Maps. It's entirely based on Bing Maps, but unfortunately, offline maps, I believe, have been phased out. So you can't create offline maps anymore. What is this? Sea of Advancents? I did not know that was even a thing. I did not even know that was a thing. And then, of course, we have the start screen variant of Internet Explorer, which, of course, does not work. And here's the desktop with all of our stuff. And then here's the desktop version of Internet Explorer. But we can see everything has carried over. All of the text documents and pictures from earlier. However, there is actually a new Photos app now on the system. We'll take a look at that next. So it's asking, how do you want to open it? There's my crappy implementation of the hairstyle in full screen. And I guess it doesn't ask you if you want to just open it in this app once or always. It's set as always by default now in Windows 8. But then we have a video program, which of course is just like Windows Media Player or Movies and TV in Windows 10. That's of course where you download movies and such, and you can watch them on your system. And then here's a text messaging app, and it's actually part of a suite, Mail and Calendar. However, as of the end of 2024, those apps have been officially deprecated, particularly in Windows 10 and 11. And sure, we'll just go ahead and let it use the location. But here's the weather app, which it doesn't look like it has pulled down anything. But essentially, it's just going to show weather conditions. And then camera this is the final camera app. So if you have like a webcam or a USB webcam connected, then of course you can take pictures and stuff. And then of course we can't use those apps, but we know what they are. And then music, I believe this is a sort of their own version of the iTunes, and like Apple. Apple does iTunes, but then here's Microsoft's implementation of music. This would of course be superseded by Groove Music, which would debut in Windows 10. And then here is their cloud backup tool, SkyDrive, which is now known as OneDrive, but essentially it's the same thing. And then remote desktop is where you connect to another computer with a special code. Google actually has a Google Teamwork. Let's see, Google TeamViewer. Yeah, those are the two that I know of. Well, the professional ones that have functionality of such. Here's where you get your stocks and finances information and everything. And then here's the final variant of the PDF Reader app in Windows 8. So of course you can browse and look for a PDF or XPS document. So now you can open those there instead of the XPS viewer like in Windows 7. And then of course there's a little shortcut to open up Explorer. And I believe the sounds in this build, they're still Windows 7, but we can actually start to see our first traces of the new Windows logo, which would replace the 2001 Windows flag that was introduced with XP. And we would see the same thing in WinVer 2, except it just says Windows 8 Consumer Preview. And then when we go back to the start screen here, So now we have Windows 8 variant of Solitaire. I'm guessing this must be a welcome video. Yeah, is this the game or is this the welcome video that's trying to play? But whatever, but that's their very early implementation of a Solitaire app, which would replace the Solitaire suite that would be included in Windows 7 and Vista. But now but also during this time, Microsoft had created. During this time, Microsoft had actually created several separate apps for their casual games line. Particularly, a few examples I can name: Sudoku, Bingo. Those are the few that I know of. But then there's separate games for Free Cell and Minesweeper. All of those would actually now be merged into one single app. It's now called Solitaire and Casual Games. I believe that's what it's now called. Yep, it is now called Microsoft Solitaire and Casual Games. But then interestingly, we have a sort of viable replacement for the 3D pinball game. It's Pinball FX2. Either this is the game starting or a welcome video. This is the start of the game. You can see how slow it's rendering all the logos. Okay. We'll just see if the app takes eternity to load or something. But as we can see here, this is the reason why people hated Windows 8. There was no start button, so you'd have to go all the way down to the corner to click on the start button there to access the start screen. And now, when we go into the corner, as you can see, here's what looks to be now the final implementation of the Charms bar. That again would be seen in the final release. So there's the start button there. There's your search, share, devices. And then the other thing is that in order to restart or shut down the system, you have to go into the settings menu or run the shutdown command. And made even worse is that there is no power options on the start screen, which I can notice right away. So we can open up settings here, and then this is where you go to click log off and shut down. But anyway, let's go back to the pinball game and check out its loading status. (2007 to 2012) Zen Studios Limited. Xbox Live this page, but the game is like taking a long time to process anything.
Sorcerer's Lair.
So let's see if this plays the exact same way as press launch to begin.
Welcome to the Sorcerer's Lair.
So this is played just like standard. Oh, that's right. This is intended for use on a touchscreen. So we gotta pull it back, and then I suppose we click on the flippers. Or do we do the Z?
Don't be afraid.
Yeah, I guess that goes to show how bad this was. Anyway, there is actually a arrow light transparency bug that I want to demonstrate before we move on. Then we go to personalize in this case, and we go to window color, and then when we open a separate personalization window and then click the basic theme, watch this. Then go back here, then uncheck, recheck, and then click save changes. Look at that. We got transparency on Windows 8. Look at that. That is something you didn't get in the OS. Well, much of that is. But again, everything is still the same. Here's our Una contact from before. So anyway, that's really all there is to see here on the consumer preview of Windows 8. We're going to move on now to the official release preview build of Windows 8, build 8400. We're going to go ahead and run the setup. There we are. This one was compiled on May 18th, 2012. So we're going to go to May 18th of 2012, which is when it was compiled. And this build would be released to the general public at the end of the month, May 31st. So then as we can see, we have the final branding for Windows 8. You can see it's still in that gray texture. It actually would be changed to purple for the final release. So here's the get the latest screen once again. And now there are actually now 3 editions of Windows 8. There's a Windows 8 Core, Windows 8 Pro, and Windows 8 Pro WMC, meaning Edition Upgrade. It says Windows 8 pre-release, so it doesn't say release preview. It says pre-release. So meaning that this is the last preview build. So it doesn't look like it'll let us keep anything. So it looks like it'll let us upgrade. However, it says that it's not going to keep anything. But it doesn't matter anyway. So essentially, we're going to be losing everything. Is it because I can't really upgrade to this edition? It doesn't look like it mentions that, but whatever. But never mind then. We will proceed with the upgrade, and I'm guessing even if we were going to do the Pro Edition, it probably still wouldn't let us upgrade anyway. So, and this was all from earlier too, so it's not really going to matter. So, it's gonna see if there's anything that needs our attention before we can start this last upgrade that we'll be doing. And I say last upgrade because I actually already have a virtual machine of the last build already installed. So it says you won't be able to use your PC while Windows installs. It looks like there's a spacing error. I think Microsoft would eventually fix that for the final release. And it says installing Windows 8. And then it says don't keep anything. And I believe it would say keep nothing in the final build. But no big deal. We're just going to go ahead and click install. But I'm noticing a different looking triangle there. That's kind of funny. But with that, this screen pretty much is exactly like the final release, except the color and the positioning. So otherwise, it's pretty complete. So we will actually just let this go, but we are actually going to be getting another boot screen change. As you can see, instead of the beta fish and developer preview, it now just says Windows. It just says Windows and nothing more. So here is the personalized screen. As you can see, this is exactly like the final release. So we'll call this Win 8 Release Pre, meaning that this is the preview build. And we'll use Express Settings. And here's the final sign into your PC message. And we can click here to sign in with without a Microsoft account. And then it shows the differences between having a Microsoft account linked and a local account. For the purposes, we're going to use local. And of course, we'll put our PC in. We'll see if we can retrieve all our stuff from Windows.old. And down there, that's something that you won't see in the final release. It says your PC will be ready in just a moment. And here it is. This is the release preview. However, the time bomb has already activated, but it says reinstall Windows now. Your license to use this evaluation version of Windows has expired. Your PC will restart in 1 hour and will continue to do so every 2 hours. Well, that's actually no big deal because we're not even going to be here for a while anyway. So here it is. This is the release preview of Windows 8. And let's see if we have the final sounds. Nope, not yet. But we would get new sounds in the pre-RTM builds, which we are going to skip because they're going to be mostly identical. So, if we go here to the C drive, and we can see there's our windows.old folder. We can go to our user, but we can click continue and we can gain access to it. And as you can see, there it is. Just like with the Vista 7 Saga, we still have all of our stuff. So what it meant by nothing was that the files would not carry over right away, but rather it put everything into the windows.old folder. So we could just go into our user account, go to the windows.old, and then point to the directories where our files originally were, and we can grab them. And then move them onto our main desktop. So there we go. We still have our text documents that say the beginning of the downfall. Here's a journal document with a shortened version of Windows 11. Here's the rich text document that says the same thing. And here's the updated Photos app with the with my crappy drawing of the crossword, and then of course my fake contact of the number 8. Once again, the charms bar is just like what we would see in the final release. And then here's what the start screen looks like. We do have a few other apps. So again, Travel, which is a preview app. This basically is like a guide. Like if you're traveling like anywhere, like let's take New York City as an example here on this page. So basically it's like a guide, like talking about the city's history and attractions to see and do while you're there. So there's something for everyone in that sense. And then there's a sports app, which makes its debut in the release preview. So the sports app, essentially you can follow sports teams and you'll get like live updates, and you can follow. So here you can follow sports news, and even you can follow your favorite teams and view stats on games and such. And then news, it's essentially the online newspaper. So that's essentially what that is. But once again, we can do the arrow bug. If we go to personalize, we open the window color page, and we can open up a second one and then change it to basic. And see, that's what we would see in the final release. And then enable transparency, we'll uncheck that and click save change. Oh yeah, then we have to go back and recheck it. That's the window color, but it doesn't matter. So that's essentially all there is to see in the release preview of Windows 8. So after 3 public previews, developer, consumer, and release, we have reached the final release to manufacturing build of Windows 8, build 9200. And as you can see, this is a Windows 8 virtual machine that I have already set up before, which is why you're seeing it in a much wider resolution. So of course, this is Windows 8 as you all know. So here's the Network 4 thing, and specifically I installed the Pro Edition, or we can do Windows key C to open the charms bar, which again, that's the final charms bar. And here's everything in their final form. So again, I explained everything about the Travel app. We'll give that a moment or so to load. It looks like it's already loaded. And I don't think any of this is going to work. So let's do Rio again, but unfortunately it does not open, or it doesn't load anything, probably because the servers no longer work. And then here's the final implementation of the Windows Store, which unfortunately no longer works after Microsoft ended support for Windows 8. The original version's support only lasted for 4 years, where Microsoft mandated everybody to move over, if they want to continue using Windows 8, over to the updated Windows 8.1, which was supported until 2023. Windows 8 was criticized upon launch, that being that it removed the most essential feature of Windows, the Start button, and furthermore, the Start menu, in favor of this new Start screen design, which many hated. And I believe many hated the having to go to the charms bar to click shut down and turn off the system. So Microsoft addressed those complaints and released an updated Windows 8.1 for free the following year. and it was made available as a free upgrade in the Microsoft Store. So you could go to the Microsoft Store and you'd see the upgrade to Windows 8.1 for free. So you could update for free to Windows 8.1. And then, of course, eventually, a few years later, when Microsoft released Windows 10 in 2015, and by the way, we're just months away now from its end of support, it was made available as a free upgrade to Windows 7 and 8 customers. However, for a long time, actually, incredibly enough, you could actually use a Windows 7 and 8 key not only to activate Windows 10, but for a short time, even Windows 11, incredibly enough. I'm so grateful I took that opportunity to put Windows 11 onto my Lenovo ThinkPad when I could. So, yeah, that's the story of the saga of Windows 8. It was a pretty long development history, that's for sure, but not as long as Vista, though, thank God. So, in the next episode, we're going to start another saga. This time, we're going to go into the server versions, and we're going to see how they evolved. But until then, as we shut it down here, we'll see you in the next episode.